Okay, I'm officially recording now. So, in our agenda, we have to review the norms first. Does anyone want to review the norms? Go, Miss B.
Have an agenda, which we do. Provide snacks.
I didn't do that this time. I'm sorry.
Make wise use of time. Have a growth mindset. Implement and follow through with what is being asked. Maintain equity of voices and be solutions oriented.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to do mostly aggressive monitoring today. That's mostly what our meeting is. So, but I did put a housekeeping thing in our first slide. When we do our grade check, because we're going to just do that through English classes, we have 3 options, and these become like progressively more involved. Option 1, if you want to click on that, Mr. S, is
restricted access.
Oh, shoot. Well, that option 1 only does 6 weeks 1, 6 weeks 2, 6 weeks 3. Option 2, I know I did this correctly on 2 and 3. Yes, okay, good. Option 2 has in what you need on the final for a whatever grade they might be looking for. And then option 3 is the one that y'all used, which is probably my favorite one. It's also the most involved though. So it has enter first and second, your best guess for what you might make third and final exam. And so then this semester calculates and they have to kind of like figure out what they've got to do here in order to get their gold grade. And then it also gives them the opportunity to calculate their GPA. So this one's kind of my favorite, but whatever y'all vote on, I will make sure is linked in the thing that I make for your kiddos.
And we need to get the semester grade calculation for period 1.
Oh, yes. I'll fix that one.
I don't think I can only view it.
Yeah, I'll fix it. So what do y'all think about option 1, 2, 3? 3?
We've used 3 before,
Yeah.
and it works.
Yeah, I liked it. So y'all told me there was one in the shared folder last year, and I never could get into that shared drive until like spring. And so when I finally got into it, I found it. I was like, oh, this one's awesome. So anyway, okay, sounds good. So I'll work on that. So my questions were, if you could pop back to our presentation. And then that's the only time we're popping out of the presentation, so you can just go ahead and hit slideshow on this. But do y'all want me to just share option 3 with you or put it in the drive, or do y'all want me to come up with like a presentation that guides them through it and has some kind of written document or an email to parents, or do we want them to do a writing piece with it?
I think it would depend on when you are able to have that presentation available.
Okay.
Because I was hoping to use this Thursday and Friday to do this grade check opportunity. And so if it's going to take a little longer than that, then I would rather us do it
I
ourselves.
can do it tonight as
Okay.
long as y'all tell me what you want in it. So do you want them to have a written document that they're writing on? Do you want them to email it to their parents and CC you or CC me? Which adds a lot of class time, but teaches them an important skill.
So I think doing it on paper is a great idea,
Okay.
so that they have a tangible,
Yep.
And we could add an option for parent signature at the bottom.
Okay, so option 3, written document, and parent signature. Do we want to do the writing piece that has them?
And we may modify the writing piece to be more, because if we're getting to this point where we have 2 data points already, and with prediction, the third one, and figuring out the final on the test, they should be able to, what is your plan? What do you need to earn this 6 weeks? What do you need to earn on the final? What is your plan to make this happen?
Yeah.
And if your previous grades are 65 or less, then you can't do what you did in the first 6 weeks. You have to do something different.
Yeah, so goal setting with an action plan.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Miss N?
Yes. I like option number 3. My only thing is I do not think I will need a paper copy.
Okay.
Just because I've been doing the parent email.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get more computer things under their belt.
Okay.
So if anything, I think I'm gonna have them do it, screenshot it, and then share it to their parents in that way.
Yeah.
And
I'm okay with not having a paper copy.
Okay,
And I
so
think it works better with the digital copy because
Mhm.
that does the math for them. So it literally, when we go to that numbers, they can
Yes.
start plugging in numbers and it makes immediate changes.
right.
And they get to make that plan out.
Yeah, for sure. So I would share this out and they would do it, but then they could write it on paper if they wanted. So what I'll do is I'll make it very simple and editable so y'all can figure out how you want to use it.
When I'm
Yes.
picturing a written document, it's more of like, this 6 weeks, I need to get at least a 74 in English.
Yes, so
This
that they
6
can
weeks, I need
pull
at
it out
least
and
a
reference
78.
it.
Like, they don't need a paper copy of the spreadsheet, that's not
Yes, correct.
necessarily helpful, but
Right.
just some sort of
But it's nice to
sentence stem
Yes.
response.
have that when they're generating the numbers to have it do, so they're not making the calculations, they're focusing on the higher thinking.
Yeah.
And how they perform, whether they do it digitally or they write it out, or email it to a parent is, I think, a teacher decision, but getting them to make that written expression
Mhm.
and maybe even, sharing their ideas with other students.
Okay, sounds good. So Miss V, you got all that in the notes so that I can make that for y'all tonight? Okay, awesome. So the next thing, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about aggressive monitoring today, which is just a very intentional way of making laps around your classroom to check for understanding. And I know Ms. V has experience with aggressive monitoring. Does anyone else have experience with aggressive monitoring?
I've just started.
You do?
Those are trainings in Ohio.
Awesome. Okay.
Really?
And you're starting to get into it.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so click next slide. So our objective is we'll be able to construct and implement our own aggressive monitoring plans by evaluating a model and exemplar templates. And we're going to kind of work through, hopefully we'll have enough time for y'all to start working on your own. But we may need to push some stuff into the next meeting. We're limited on time, so sometimes we have to split into the next meeting. So go ahead and do the next slide. So I have a think, pair, share. And I just want y'all to ask your partner, the person sitting next to you, what is the ideal amount of time for a student to receive feedback on their work in a perfect world? Ideally, they would have feedback within this amount of time. And then how and when do we use data to make adjustments to tier 1 instruction? And so I'm going to give you a minute to think and then a minute to pair, and then we're going to share. Okay, so 1 minute to think, and y'all can take notes on your computer or open your notes app, or you can write them down, whatever makes you happy.
I got you.
Nice. Okay, there goes our timer. So I'm gonna set. Mr. B did that timer for me because he's just awesome and on it. I'm gonna hit play on this timer, so y'all have 1 minute to share with your partner and make sure there's equity, so around 20 to 30 seconds each.
I would say 24 to 48 hours to get feedback using the assignment rubric that's built in that I use. And then as the second part, we should be using our data to make adjustments for the next week.
That's one of my favorite parts about it.
Which is why I like to use the weekend to reflect over the data and then make those final plans and bring them in on Monday.
Yeah, I like that. I think that in like the most ideal perfect world, I would want to give students feedback immediately because I love even, yeah. And I think that in that moment, like, you're about it. So if I'm about it, then tell me.
Your multiple choice can lead to that
Right.
feedback, but it's the writing
Yeah.
that's the harder part.
Yeah. And
So I kind of planned to give y'all an extra minute if you needed it, but I feel like I heard you were hitting on like such smart things already. So, Miss Ann, will you share what's the ideal amount of time for a student to receive feedback?
yes, of course I will.
Okay.
So I said in a perfect world, I would want my students to receive feedback immediately. And I said immediately because I like immediate feedback. You know, whenever I'm doing something, I want that. Like, am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? So I can immediately shift. I know that, unfortunately, whenever we're grading big projects, that's not, and with our class sizes, it's not. We can't do that. Yeah, easy to do, but in a perfect world, yeah, immediately.
Okay. So I'm hearing immediate feedback would be great.
Yes.
Because they can make adjustments real time. However, it becomes difficult with bigger assignments
Yes.
and bigger classes.
Yes.
Okay. That's exactly how I feel about it too. And Miss Fidgerine, how and when do we use data? Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Fee. Hopefully I can bleep that one out. How and when do we use data to make adjustments to Tier 1 instruction?
I think that a lot of the time, by the time that we have tested a skill that we've taught via Tier 1 instruction and have data available, we've already moved on in the curriculum and oftentimes don't use that data to implement changes to our teaching and lesson plans until the following year or cycle when we're using that again. Because it is not often that we are teaching the same lesson with the same teach. So I think a lot of times let's say we're trying to teach inferencing in one specific way, it will often be a full school year before we teach that again.
Right. And by then, you may not even be remembering what the data looks like, right?
Or what you did the first time.
Right, or how you did it the first time. Okay, so, good stuff. Can we switch to the next slide? Okay, so our agenda today is to see a video of someone engaged in aggressive monitoring, and then to name the key concepts that we see, and then to use templates and planning time to actually plan out the do it part, where you're planning out your aggressive monitoring. And then perhaps at the next meeting, we're going to try to squeeze in a practice round of aggressive monitoring with each other before you have to implement it in your classroom, so we can give each other feedback and kind of do like a practice round of learning thing. Okay, next slide. So, yes.
Sorry, Ms. Bohannon.
No, you're
But Dela Cruz sent me some templates. Do you want me to send that
sure.
to everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would like for you to make a list, and you can do this again if you like paper, do it on paper. If you like typing in your notes app or whatever, do that. But what do you notice that seems to be intentional from the teacher's perspective? So you're watching her more than you're watching the kids necessarily. What does it look like she planned and is doing intentionally? And then any questions that you have. Mostly questions about what the teacher is doing. Ready when you are.
You have two really short passages to read. They're more like little paragraphs and a prompt at the bottom. You're going to plan on the back. So it mostly just looks like a blank piece of paper, but that's where your plan is going to go. It's a little bit of outline practice. You have 12 minutes to do this. Begin. And I'm coming around first looking for those full headings. I don't know to Jason for his urgency. Don't forget the active reading. The passages are short, so you should study it. And I'm coming around now, checking for your author's purpose note. I'll check it off if it's correct. I'll put a dot if it's not. Don't forget that note. An author's purpose note should start with a verb. The author is trying to do what? It could be to inform, to persuade, any of those things. Just make sure it starts with a verb. You have 7 minutes remaining. You want to be getting to the outline within the next minute. And now that I'm seeing people getting to the outline, I'm coming around checking your thesis statement. Don't forget to put quotes around the titles of the articles, but then you got it. So this is asking you to compare the key information. I don't think the key information in the second one is polar bears. I think that's a detail. So what is the key idea presented in that second article? The first part of your thesis is excellent. Just fix that part. Nice, Maya. I like saying how they show the information. Nice job. You have 5 minutes to complete your outline. I see strong theses, now I'm looking for strong evidence. Andrew's doing a really nice job of writing his evidence in shorthand. Paragraph 4, sentence 2. Doesn't take a super long time. Inea did the same thing, just a key word from the quote.
Okay. So while we were watching that, I marked y'all's papers. I was not doing aggressive monitoring. I just put checks next to a couple of things that I want y'all to make sure that you share here in a second. Y'all wrote some awesome things. So who wants to start sharing the things I put a check mark next to?
I'll start.
Okay. Thank you.
I noticed she had different markings for what she was checking.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well said. And thank you.
Mark, thank you.
And also, one wondering I had was, who does she start with? Because I'm wondering, like, is that the student that she wants to check on first? Is that the student that she knows is going to be well off and she can monitor immediately and leave? So that was one of my wonderings.
Okay, so I love that you noticed the first thing you said, that she had specific markings, and it was clear the kids knew what the markings meant, but she gave them a reminder. It's clear this isn't the first time she's done it, right? And then your wondering is excellent. It's on the next slide, but I'll go ahead and answer it. She has what's called a pathway, and you make this pathway very intentional, and you go to your highest achieving, fastest working students first. And that's twofold. One is you can give feedback to those students quickly and move on so that they don't always end up being the only ones not getting feedback because they're not necessarily going to raise their hand or they're not necessarily going to, ask for help. And so you can go ahead and give them that feedback quickly. And I said it's twofold because the other part of that is if you go to your 6 fastest, most successful learners first and 4 of them are needing guidance, yes, if they're all making the same mistake and needing guidance, then you probably need to stop and do a reteach right there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If your strongest learners are struggling, then you communicate something in effective ways.
Yep, good. Yes.
So whenever they were talking about creating a pathway, I thought like you were actually creating like this is how I'm.
You
Like,
are. You
but-
are. And I'll show you an example later.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'll on the example that I show you, she has her students kind of like sitting in a specific arrangement based on like their ability level, and she has those outside students as her first round, and then she starts working through the inside of the room in order. And so, yes, you're right. It is creating a physical pathway, but with the intention of catching every student that you can behind it. Excellent. Okay, Miss V.
Well, I have way more check marks than everybody else.
So where do you want
So
me to start?
it's hard to know. I noticed that she was saying what she was checking for as each round began. She would say, okay, now I'm going to come around and check your author's purpose statement. Now I'm going to come around and check the quote that you used. Now I'm going to come around and so I thought that was really smart.
Did you hear the first one? She said points to some kid for his urgency.
Oh, so
that
that's my
was a
second
really
one.
cool routine.
Positive reinforcement, like calling out the kids who are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
Whispering the feedback to kids who needed redirection to avoid embarrassment. So you're making it loud whenever you're saying, oh, points to so-and-so for getting right on it, but you're whispering, okay, so let's put a quote around it. Like, that was really smart. Immediate feedback. And I said that which you wrote an exclamation point in addition to a check mark for, so I think that means it's important. But the fast pace means that there's no room for disengagement. So students can't get on their phones or do something else because she's coming around in the next minute to come and check their feedback, to come and give them feedback. So there's no chance for them to be not on task.
Yeah, for sure. Mr. B, will you also share your second one? You started talking about it a little bit, but it kind of goes along with what Ms. B said.
Yeah, it's just the urgency is noticeable, and it's pre-taught, and it's drastically different than what we see on a day-to-day basis. Like the 12 minutes is how long we may give kids for this, but we would be getting through the initial read-through versus getting through the read-through, the thesis, the annotation, and the feedback all in 12 minutes.
Right.
Just because urgency hasn't necessarily been instilled in our kids.
And I really like the way that you're wording this because you're making like the positive presupposition that kids can learn, that our kids can learn urgency, and that we can be in control of improving that. So I love that. And then Mr. S.
She had a clipboard and was checking off the specific targets and making notes on the students.
I like that as well.
Yep. And then what was the other one?
Time and resource reminders.
Yeah. So time and resource reminders. This is where you can find this. This is how much time you have, and I think that contributes to the urgency too. The chunking, the frequent reminders, and the knowledge that she's about to be reading over my shoulder, right? And then
Well, if Mr. B's talking about urgency, I think our students understand urgency. They just have not appropriately applied urgency because there was a lot of urgent people today and yesterday about grades. And I had to explain to them that urgency, was misplaced because the grades were due. And I had to explain to one person, that my proof sheets are due by noon, and the only time I will have to drop them off is on my way to this meeting. So I can't have you turn in something else because my deadline has already approached.
yeah, and I think if we think about the psychology of motivation, really, if we're focusing our urgency on learning as opposed to grades, then that's going to help because you notice she's not talking about like points or grades or anything. She's talking about, I want to see that you can do this skill. And so if we focus our efforts on urgency on anything, it needs to be like the learning and the work during the class period too. So I think that's a really good
Well,
point.
that's what our formative grades are about.
Mhm.
Is are they learning along the way, and if they don't quite demonstrate it the first time,
Mhm.
they can continue to redo it
Mhm.
with no penalty. As they're getting that additional instruction, they're building that skill. It's only in summative and other tasks that may not have that redo option.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so if you'll just click through as we talk about them. So we talked about how the teacher had prepared her checks ahead of time. She was going to check on heading, author's purpose, thesis, and evidence. So she knew what her rounds were going to be. Next. She had a roster of students in hand and she was marking it. And that was one of the things Mr. S noticed. And that is for her data so that she can make instructional decisions right there in the moment, like we talked about. If the first 6 kids you see, 4 of them are off, then we need to make that instructional adjustment right in the moment. Or it might be to assess where they are and where they're ready to go for the next class period. Teacher is celebrating, she's redirecting, she's checking for understanding, she's doing quick task reminders, she's marking student papers, she's providing time reminders. Those were all things that you guys noticed. And teacher is not performing a long reteach at a student desk. So what I have seen sometimes when teachers do checks for understanding, they end up stuck because they're doing a long reteach and they only get to maybe 4 students in a 15-minute period because they're stuck. And the point of this is to point out what they need to work on, but to let them do that productive struggle still. And even if it's a new thing and it's very difficult, absolutely use their peers too. This doesn't have to be like complete individual work. You can do some of this during paired work as well. And then teacher is not asking students if they need help or waiting for hands to go up. This is everybody sees me, everyone gets feedback from me, period. And then we talked about what would she do if, what if in all of the whole round, only 4 students really seem like they need a reteach? Like, I need to sit down with these kids. What do you think she might do?
Small group.
Small group during class. She might invite them to tutoring. She might make a plan for the next class period to do a small group if she hasn't already like worked out how to do that during this period. She can make adjustments for those 4 students. But on the next bullet, if 14 students need a reteach, what would you do? Yep.
Whole group reteach.
Yep. Whole group reteach. You just stop. Okay. Next slide.
And I think that's an important thing to show students is I've had to do it. Say, hey, what I taught yesterday or what I'm teaching now didn't work.
Didn't stick.
So let's try it again.
Yeah.
And so, we're taking the onus off of them. Even
Right.
if we're not paying attention.
Yeah.
But still say, hey, here's what I have. Let's try it.
Yeah. I love that you said taking the onus off of them because it can be disheartening for kids and like negatively.
You're all getting this wrong.
I know.
I've never made a mistake.
Yes. And that starts to negatively impact their self-efficacy, right? So if you kind of take some of the ownership and say, we're going to try this a different way, and I love that you said that. Okay. Okay, thank you. So exemplar and pathway are 2 things that we're going to talk about. Pathway is what Miss N asked about. Create a pathway that allows you to see your high achievers first and so on. And we kind of already talked about the purpose of that. Having an exemplar means just doing the work yourself before giving the assignment to your students. And so, like, we would never teach a short story without having read it first, right? Has anyone ever done that? I did that once. It's like, shoot. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. But working through, like, whatever it is, let's say it's a writing task, working through that writing task yourself helps you to have an exemplar, or helps you to represent the best work a student could turn in, allows you to see where the misconceptions might be, and then probably most importantly, it gives you that clear instructional destination. What's the best college-ready piece of writing that I could expect from students at the end of this piece of instruction?
The other thing it does is it gives you your timing.
True, your timing exactly. That's so true.
Now, when I do mine, I adjust it to the fact that I will do it a lot faster than they will.
Yes.
So I usually double the amount of time it took me for my honor students to be able to do the same task.
Uh-huh. Yep, exactly. Okay, next slide. Okay, so on these, and I'm not necessarily going to pull these up. I want you guys to take your time to pull these up. I want you to look at the resources on this first site, look at this roster that this teacher uses for aggressive monitoring, and then there's a pathway, an example of a pathway, and then feedback codes that you could give your students on that third one. And we're going to do that for probably the rest of this meeting. And then the next time we meet, you're going to look at your next lesson plan an aggressive monitoring for that lesson, and then we're going to practice aggressive monitoring on each other. Sound good? Okay, so I'm just going to be here while you all check out these resources and ask me any questions that you have.
The first code is I handed you a new piece of paper. Your handwriting and effort is unacceptable. Start over.
Right? And that one's for English, is that right? Yeah. No, we're not going to do that. Do you think that's something that you would make one of your codes in your classroom?
No, I used to have double check, which was like really great, correct, needs work, and then I would have incomplete.
Okay.
But I don't know that that always works because my kids that were incomplete knew they were incomplete.
Right.
And then that was almost a fixed growth mindset.
Yes.
Or
Fixed mindset.
fixed mindset. Because it was like, well, it's already on your paper now.
Yes. So perhaps, what do y'all think when if you get to a kid and they haven't completed it, other than a quick question, you might ask like, what are you stuck on? And try to have a quick conversation.
I wonder if, I mean, this might take a lot of front loading, but I wonder if you could create some sentence stems
Yes.
and then just have it in script. And if you come to a kid who doesn't have it, just
Hand it to them. Yeah. And so I know you guys. Yes. Yeah, the blank paper is extremely intimidating, especially with our language learners. And I know y'all use sentence stems really well already. And so if you already have those and you know which ones you're gonna offer, like on a regular basis, you might even just have some printed out and highlight one and hand it to the kid and say, this one would be really good for this task.
yeah. Or even if we can have them laminated,
True.
then you can just
You could dry erase circle. This one would be good for this task. Yeah. That's a really good idea. You're so smart. Yeah. You could just cover their whole desk in laminated things that you could mark and circle. True. You have to cover it with butcher paper. Honestly.
So this is all, I already do notes taking my students because I have a seating chart and I can go through and granted they were just testing in this, but that will show how I go through and make notes.
Food, pet foods, and things
Love
like that. And you can take them to
I'm being crazy.
C217, Never Rest Room, and that will be through December the 12th.
Are you making your instructional pathways? You already have instructional pathways, don't you?
I do, but now I'm redoing them.
You're redoing them.
It's actually just failing a Rorschach test.
Oh.
You don't understand. This is a butterfly.
Yes.
So this is my new layout
Yes.
for my kids,
Automotive life skills.
right?
While your dining club is doing something, tomorrow is
These are
the
kids.
Okay.
Oh, well, they're on this side.
program of choice, open house and activity
And
fair.
then these are
That's
kids.
from 5 to 9 again. That's the program of choice. That's kids
So-
open house.
So I've just been going like this.
You didn't say like amazing.
But also the JV ninth grade girls
I think that's perfect.
It's gonna be at South Hill
For third?
tomorrow at a tournament. Actually, it's all the way through
Yeah.
Saturday.
So then what you would need to do in this situation is make sure, and you could do the pathway the opposite and start with a small group if you wanted, and you might put your strongest students here, and that way when you do a turn and talk, if you want them partnered with someone of similar ability, you can say turn to your partner. If you want them partnered with with someone who's a little bit stronger, like say groups of 3, then you would have 2, average students and 1 high student and make them join. Do you get what I'm saying? So it could help with intentional grouping and then also put you with your high students all in the same spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that you can make that path first and then do the bigger.
Thank you.
And if not, then put all the high achieving students here. at the
Exactly.
start.
Yep, exactly. Precisely. Because that was always part of my puzzle was how do I keep my intentional grouping while planning for aggressive monitoring if I want my strongest students to be the ones I can see. So
First, lunch.
it takes some
First,
brain work.
lunch.
Okay, that's
First,
officially the end
lunch.
of our meeting.